Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Total Retail Talks. I'm Joe Keenan, Editor-in-Chief of Total Retail, and today I'm joined by Janet Ries, who is the Vice President of Marketing at Carhartt. Janet and I are going to be discussing Carhartt's upcoming campaign for St. Patrick's Day with Guinness. So thank you for joining me today, Janet.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here.
So as I noted, Carhartt recently announced that it would be teaming up with Guinness for a variety of activities related to St. Patrick's Day later this week. Can you tell our audience what you have planned?
Yeah, I wish I could say this was our first year. We actually started with them last year, and due to the pandemic, it kind of got lost in the shuffle. So we were able to sort of come together again and put together sort of a great storyline between our two brands to talk about how we can get a new collection out there, how we can get a shared experience, and how to help celebrate and bring some joy to consumers right now, because people are missing some of those very basic elements that they would normally be doing right now in preparation for St. Patrick's Day. The first thing we did was we launched another collection with them this year, mid-February. It's a limited edition collection with Guinness, which has done phenomenally well, knock on wood, calling on all hardworking men and women to reimagine their St. Patrick's Day celebration, to make your own parade. If you think about it, due to the pandemic, so many people can't get out there. The pubs aren't necessarily fully open. Many of the major cities that used to have parades on this day are not able to have them still. So we thought and put our heads together, what can be really interesting is to invite consumers to make their own parade. And by doing so, we went out and did a tremendous campaign and film up in the UP. If anyone's familiar with that, that's the Upper Peninsula. Very cold, but put together some really creative content and storytelling opportunities that are out there talking about what people can do to help celebrate the holiday. And we really just put together a cohesive plan that, while it's only a one-day celebration, it's something that people really get excited about, because it's an optimistic time to bring people together. And that's really what we wanted our story to be about. An optimistic opportunity in a time where people can't gather together, but can still have some modicum of joy to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Part of the collection this year was also something that was really important to Guinness. They wanted a shirt that really talked about something that they've been focused on as a call to action, is work for the better. And when we heard that slogan, that statement, we said, well, that certainly ties in with Carhartt. So we have some special edition gear that calls out work for the better, that really exemplifies, I think, our two brands coming together to help really celebrate that tagline for them and for us, because it leans so strongly into both of our brands of work for the better.
Yeah, that's a great kind of quick synopsis of the partnership, and to your point, it really that tagline fits perfectly with the brand that Carhartt has created in terms of when you think of workwear and work for the better. Carhartt is immediately comes to mind for so many. So let's talk a little bit about the relationship between the two companies. So talk a little bit about why Guinness is the right brand partner for Carhartt, and how the company's values align.
Well, it's interesting, Joe. A few years ago, there was a like friend between Guinness and Carhartt that actually brought us together. This was a pretty famous guy out there. You might know him. His name is Jason Momoa. And he had a really strong affinity for the two brands. And he said, I love these two brands. Why don't they work together? So I was fortunate enough to go to Dublin with our creative director and a few others, and we started the relationship there. We went to Dublin, we went to James Gate to really understand who they are and to really sort of assess the relationship. One thing with Carhartt is we don't just jump into partnerships very easily. We really want to make sure it's a fit for us. And just upon going over there and learning so much about the brand, when you understand Carhartt being a 130-year plus brand, they're exactly 130 years older than we are. There are very few brands or partnerships that we could find where we're the young kid on the block. So we came together and we met in Dublin and just started the conversation there. And it just continued to marinate. When we came back to the States and we discussed this, we got in touch with the folks that run the Guinness business in the US and just started the relationship there. What could we do? And once we realized our values were so in sync with it, when you think back about 230 years ago plus, when James Gate was started, our guy and our gal were working there. They were building the kegs. They were building, not the kegs, the barrels. They were working and making sure that all the beer was stood up to the standard that Arthur Guinness had created. And so that was the bond and those values of hard work and a commitment to the craft and what one does spurred on the conversation and allowed us to start creating this ongoing relationship that we've had.
Yeah.
We really look at Guinness as sort of a friend of the family. It's a friend of Carhartt.
Yeah, and I think kind of that common bond in terms of the commitment to the quality of your product is really what jumps out at me too. Is that that's something that you share, that you guys can celebrate together.
Yeah, it really is a unique partnership, and again, it's not what I love about it. It's the collaboration and partnership goes much deeper than just what's the product that we can make with one another.
So you've kind of gone on, you mentioned going over to Dublin, you meet with the right people, you determine, okay, yeah, this is makes sense. This is a good uh, partnership that we have here. So you then, in terms of the marketing of that, what is the kind of the next step in terms of how Carhartt goes about marketing this campaign? And you mentioned some of the branded merchandise, but tell us a little bit about getting the word out to consumers, whether it be through some of the different marketing channels such as email and social and all the other different ways, your own site, content. Tell us a little bit about how you're kind of getting the word out that Carhartt and Guinness have paired up.
Yeah, I mean, we really use the full arsenal of what's in the wheelhouse, right? We really started out with a joint beyond a PR. We looked at earned media as the first step forward, telling the reason why our two brands were coming together. And so we worked cross-functionally with their team and our team here, and Amy was on, working with them to help craft and create that story. And then we started putting together a thought process of, well, let's make the product. So how are we going to get the product out there? We put together a seating plan that was going to reach and did reach a number of our influencers, and all of our influencers we call friends of Carhartt, because they truly are our friends and they help spread that story with us. We shared those out with we also seeded some of the media partnerships out there. And in a way, as soon as we started teasing the campaign, so we did a tease before anything came out first, just to talk about the partnership and relationship. And that took off wildfire. It was a social post, simple as could be. And the amount of engagement came through twofold, both on the Carhartt site as well as the Guinness sites. And people really understood why we're come together. And they were jazzed about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just like, wow, this is very cool. And so beyond that, we put together some really strong campaigns. Last year, the first campaign was about a parade in Chicago. Like, what's the greenest city in the US besides Boston or Chicago? And they dye their river green. So our creative story was really talking about the plumbers that dye the river green and why it's so important to the city. And how that, again, was a joint bond between Carhartt and Guinness. It was a united front. Beyond the campaign that we pushed out there, it certainly went on typical channels, OTT and linear television, lives on YouTube still today in our portfolio of stories. And we just continued to tell that story. And what we tried to do was we resurrected it again this past fall, coming out with a special collection of gear just in time for the holidays, just to keep the momentum and the storyline going. We continued then to tease up what we were going to start doing for this year. And again, this year, because of the pandemic, we know that people were looking for experiences. They wanted to make experiences themselves. So we had the idea, and our creative team came up with a great solution of, well, let's have people make their own parade. And that's what we did. So we created some content, whether with video, we created some audio. We used YouTube creators to tell us how they would make their own parade. And we also shared this out with many of our influencer friends and our friends of Carhartt with a kit of, tell us how you're going to make your own parade. And with that simple notion of hashtag make your own parade, it created a continued buzz about the relationship between our two brands.
Yeah, and it's a great idea. Obviously, with so many cities having canceled, their St. Patrick's Day parades, not only last year but this year as well. To kind of create that celebration, that joy still alive. Create your own parade that's a great way to kind of encapsulate the messaging you're trying to get across. So just shifting gears slightly, let's talk a little bit about the customers between the two brands. One, do you believe there's a fair amount of crossover between Carhartt and Guinness's customers? I can speak for myself only, but I'm certainly a customer of both brands. And then secondly, how can you kind of tap into those consumer affinities for both brands and do that within your marketing campaigns?
That's a great question. I do feel that there's a strong affinity in relationship amongst our brands, and the joy of coming together with a collaboration and how we really think of collaborations is how does our voice get to extend to a new audience through these partnerships? And so we know that both brands are united by the spirit of hard work and master craftsmanship. We know that, and that goes with our consumer base. We have a core consumer that understands the grit of that indexes so highly in the Midwest and West, which is so important for the market to understand. It's probably a little skewed heavily male, and we know that, but it's also reaching this next generation of consumers, of women who are really interested in Guinness beer as well because of the heritage and the story it has. And so understanding what Guinness's focus and goals are is to reach newer audience and perhaps a more diverse and younger audience. It ties in exactly with what our goals are. We know that, again, it will hit the core consumer, someone that might be trending a little higher, someone that might be in the heartland. But we also have the intent that the strength of our two brands coming together will allow us to both reach that next generation of consumers that are up and coming to understand who Carhartt is and who Guinness is.
So that's a good segue into my next question, Janet. And you've kind of touched on it in your last answer there. But when you embark on a partnership and a relationship like this, I imagine that at the outset you establish internally at Carhartt, and I'm sure Guinness probably did the same. Some goals. How can this benefit our brand? What can we gain from this? Tell us a little bit about what those conversations were like internally at Carhartt. Some of the things that you've identified as you continue on with this collaboration with Guinness.
When you think about it, a lot of things we look at is the collaborations we choose to go with we want people to think, why would Carhartt partner with them? And then you scratch their head and it's an aha moment. And the intent of it is, again, to try to reach new consumers that neither of our brand might be reaching independently. So when you look to Guinness, they have a new brewery in Baltimore that they opened up. They're trying to convince consumers that they're more than just the dark stout, right? We have been in a similar parody of understanding that we make more than just durable gear. We make gear for all year long, not just a heavy duck that's being used in the wintertime. So we both had a similar nuance that we had to break through with some new consumers to say, look at us differently, because our offering is well beyond what you may think we are and who we are. So that was one of the first goals. The second goal was, it just was fun. We have a great camaraderie with the team. We respect each other to the utmost of what each of our teams do. We each tell really strong, rich stories. And that's really what we're about. We want to get rich emotional stories out there in such a way that connects with us. And Guinness is in the same pattern that we are, of creating something that will get the earned media and the paid media all working together to get a cohesive program.
Yeah, I think to your point towards the ability to tell these rich stories, the heritage of the heritages of the two brands, and that lends itself to be able to tell not only some of your customer stories but your product stories, and just the overall spirit that is established between the two companies, lends itself to kind of that storytelling angle.
Yeah, it really does. And first and foremost, we want to be storytellers as a brand. People can sell gear, but you have to really believe in the values and the stories and the emotional relationship you can have.
So lastly, Janet, we've talked a lot about the collection and the collaboration with Guinness for St. Patrick's Day. Still early in 2021. Any other thoughts around Carhartt around other holiday themed or other marketing campaigns, brand partnerships that might be planned for later in the year, or even looking into next year and beyond?
Yeah, we're always looking at that. I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar. We did a partnership and have an ongoing partnership with Chevy, and we have our own Silverado out there. There is a Chevy Carhartt Silverado, and that's sort of an ongoing storytelling opportunity. It was announced and came to life last, I think, November. Someone will have to fact check me on that. But
Yep.
We've been working on it for a few years with them because, as you can imagine, creating a truck takes some time.
Yeah.
So that's a really an interesting one that we have for an ongoing relationship and storytelling opportunity. We're also in the midst of kicking off and producing our Mother's Day campaign next week. We're producing it next week, and we're planning to go live April 15th or so, 18th, somewhere in there, really helping celebrate hardworking women and moms.
Yeah.
And knowing that, gosh darn it, they need a day off. And we have
Especially this year, right?
to it. Pardon?
I said especially this year, right? Or this past year?
Especially this year. It's been a tough year for all. And moms have been doing it all. So we're paying homage to that, and we're going to have some really strong activations and some really unique ways in which to tell our story. So we're excited about that. June falls into sort of National Safety Month, something that, we as a brand who focuses on the safety of our hardworking consumers first and foremost. We want to make sure that they know we have their back and have the gear for them. And then we continue on to many others. Labor Day, last year we did a tremendous job with an earned media campaign, really talking about how every day is Labor Day. And we took the entire sales of our day from 7 to 7, all of the proceeds went to Skills USA. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Skills USA, but it is a organization that really helps get youth into trade labor jobs that they might be interested in. So lots of other things coming up our sleeve in the next few months and the next few years.
Yeah, that's some exciting things to look forward to coming from Carhartt. I want to take this opportunity to thank Janet Ries, the Vice President of Marketing at Carhartt, for joining us today on Total Retail Talks and giving us all the great insight into the brand's collaboration with Guinness for St. Patrick's Day and some other things it has planned for later in the year. So thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at mytotalretail.com/podcast for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Total Retail Talks.